A patient is prepped for surgery. The operating room is ready, but the surgeon isn't in the room. He's 5,000 miles away, operating through a machine in real time with millimeter precision. Telesurgery has been a dream for decades. Now, powered by 5G and robotics, it's operating on real patients, rewriting who gets access to world-class medicine and where on earth you have to be to receive it. Hit subscribe because the future of medicine is only getting started. For most of human history, surgery meant one thing: a surgeon, a patient, and a room. The same room. You needed skilled hands close enough to touch you. If you needed a specialist and none existed near you, you were out of options. Geography was a death sentence. In the 1990s, researchers began asking a radical question. What if the surgeon didn't have to be physically present at all? What if distance became irrelevant? The idea was simple. Use robotics to replicate the surgeon's hand movements, transmit those movements over a network, execute them on the other side with the same precision as if the surgeon were standing right there. The concept was originally developed for the US military to operate on wounded soldiers in combat zones without putting surgeons in the field. Lives lost not from the wound, but from the distance to care. By the early 2000s, the first real milestone arrived. A team in New York performed surgery on a patient in Strasbourg, France, nearly 7,000 kilometers apart. It worked. The operation was a success, and for a brief moment, the world took notice. Then progress stalled. The technology existed, but the infrastructure didn't. Internet speeds were too slow. Signal delays made precision surgery dangerous. In surgery, a delay of even half a second between a surgeon's movement and the robot's response can be the difference between a successful procedure and a catastrophic one. Then 5G changed everything. Ultra-low latency, near instantaneous signal transmission. Suddenly, the barrier that had frozen telesurgery for 2 decades was gone, and with it, a technology once dismissed as science fiction started becoming standard medical infrastructure. Today, hospitals, tech companies, and governments are racing to build the telesurgery networks that will define the next era of medicine. We are no longer asking whether telesurgery is possible. We are asking how fast we can scale it and how many lives it can save. At the heart of telesurgery is a deceptively simple system. A surgeon sits at a console. They move, the robot moves with them. But what happens between those two actions is anything but simple. The surgeon's hand movements are captured, digitized, scaled, and transmitted as data packets across a network, all within milliseconds. Latency is everything. For telesurgery to work safely, the signal delay between surgeon and robot must stay under 10 milliseconds. That's 10 one-thousandths of a second. Human hands can't even detect a gap that small. The robotic instruments used in telesurgery are engineered to exceed human capability. They rotate a full 360 degrees. They filter out natural hand tremors. They can scale down large movements into micro-precise incisions invisible to the naked eye. Some systems now include haptic feedback, meaning the surgeon can actually feel resistance through the controls, tissue tension, the pressure of a suture, sensation transmitted across thousands of miles. 5G provides the low-latency backbone, but the full telesurgery stack also relies on dedicated fiber optic connections, edge computing nodes positioned close to both surgeon and patient, and AI-assisted error correction running in the background at all times. The surgeon sees a magnified, high-definition view of the surgical field, far more detailed than the human eye alone could ever provide, standing over a patient in an open operating theater. When it all works together, the robotics, the network, the haptics, the imaging, telesurgery doesn't just replicate what a surgeon can do in a room. In several measurable ways, it surpasses it. This isn't a workaround for distance. It is a genuine upgrade to the surgical experience itself, for the surgeon and for the patient. To understand what telesurgery really means, you have to stop thinking about the technology for a moment and start thinking about the people it exists to serve. Right now, across the world, there are hundreds of millions of people living in regions where specialist surgical care simply does not exist. No neurosurgeon, no cardiac surgeon, no vascular specialist within reach. For these patients, a diagnosis that is entirely treatable in a major city becomes a death sentence simply because of where they were born. Distance kills, not the disease, the distance. In 2021, surgeons in China performed a remote telesurgery procedure on a patient located over 3,000 kilometers away. The operation, a complex hepatobiliary surgery, was completed successfully using a 5G network connection. The surgeon never left their city, the patient never had to travel, and the outcome was clinically equivalent to what would have been achieved in a world-class urban hospital. The military applications are equally significant. DARPA has been funding research into battlefield telesurgery for years, the vision being that a wounded soldier in a combat zone could receive specialist surgical intervention within the golden hour without any surgeon ever entering the danger zone. Consider what this means for pediatric surgery. Rare childhood conditions that require hyper-specialized surgeons, conditions where there may be only a handful of qualified surgeons in the entire world. Telesurgery means that expertise is no longer locked to a single geography. One surgeon, positioned anywhere on Earth, capable of operating on patients across multiple continents in a single day. That is not a distant vision. That is the operational model that telesurgery is actively building toward right now. And for the patients who have already experienced it, the outcomes speak for themselves. Reduced travel trauma, faster access to care, recovery times that match or exceed those from traditional open surgery. The human story of telesurgery is not just a story about technology. It is a story about equity, about who gets access to the best care the world has to offer, and whether that access will finally stop being determined by a postcode. For the first time in human history, the answer to that question might actually be changing, and the people who stand to benefit most are the ones who have always had the least. The data behind telesurgery is no longer theoretical. It is accumulating fast, and what it is showing is reshaping the assumptions of an entire medical industry. Studies comparing robotic remote surgery outcomes to traditional open surgery have found success rates consistently above 97%. In some procedure categories, robotic precision has been shown to outperform human hands operating without assistance. Recovery times tell an equally compelling story. Patients who undergo minimally invasive robotic procedures, the foundation of telesurgery, report significantly shorter hospital stays, lower rates of postoperative infection, and faster returns to normal daily activity compared to open surgery equivalents. On average, robotic surgery patients are discharged 1 to 2 days earlier than open surgery patients. That gap compounds dramatically at scale. Across thousands of procedures, it translates into billions of dollars in reduced healthcare costs and millions of recovered patient days. Tremor elimination is one of the most clinically significant advantages. Even the steadiest human hand produces micromovements imperceptible to the eye. Robotic systems filter these out entirely, delivering a level of stillness no human surgeon can physically achieve unaided. The global footprint of telesurgery procedures is expanding rapidly. China, the United States, South Korea, and several European nations have all conducted successful remote surgical operations. The number of 5G-enabled surgical facilities is doubling year on year in leading markets. Investment is following the results. The global surgical robotics market was valued at over $14 billion in 2023. Analysts project it will exceed $45 billion by the end of the decade, driven primarily by telesurgery adoption, AI integration, and expanding 5G infrastructure across emerging markets. Artificial intelligence is accelerating the results further. AI systems are now being trained on millions of surgical data points, learning to flag anomalies, predict complications before they occur, and guide robotic instruments with a level of situational awareness that supplements even the most experienced surgeon in the room. When you combine tremor elimination, AI assistance, magnified imaging, and haptic feedback into a single surgical system, the result is a procedure that is more precise, more consistent, and in many cases safer than anything that came before it. Not marginally, meaningfully. And the pace of progress is not slowing. Every month, new clinical trials are publishing results. New surgical robots are entering regulatory approval. New 5G networks are coming online in regions that have never had reliable broadband connectivity before. The data is no longer asking us to believe in telesurgery. It is asking us to keep up with it, because the results are arriving faster than the institutions built to evaluate them can process. We are at the base of an exponential curve, and the numbers, the real clinical peer-reviewed numbers, suggest that what we have seen so far is not the peak. It is the opening chapter of something far larger than anyone initially predicted. Telesurgery is not just a medical breakthrough, it is a civilizational one. And like every technology that has ever reshaped society at its foundations, it arrives carrying both extraordinary promise and serious questions that demand honest answers. The promise is clear: universal access to surgical expertise, the elimination of geography as a barrier to life-saving care, a world where the quality of medicine you receive is determined by your condition, not your postcode, your income, or the country you were born in. One specialist, 5 patients, 5 different countries, all in a single operating day. That compression of surgical reach is going to fundamentally alter how healthcare systems are designed, funded, and delivered across every nation on Earth. But the questions are equally serious. When a surgeon operates remotely, who bears legal responsibility if something goes wrong? The surgeon? The hospital? The network provider whose signal dropped at a critical moment? These are not hypothetical concerns. They are live regulatory debates happening right now in legislatures around the world. Cybersecurity is another frontier that cannot be ignored. A surgical robot connected to a 5G network is, by definition, a connected device, and connected devices can be hacked. The implications of a cyber attack on an active surgical system are not abstract, they are catastrophic. This is a vulnerability the industry is working urgently to close, but has not yet fully solved. There is also the question of equity in deployment. The nations and healthcare systems most likely to adopt telesurgery first are the ones that need it least: wealthy, urban, already well served by specialist infrastructure. The communities that stand to benefit most may be the last to receive access. Without deliberate policy intervention, telesurgery risks becoming another technology that widens the gap it was built to close. The impact on surgical training is profound and not entirely straightforward. If the best surgeons in the world can now serve patients remotely, what happens to the development of the next generation? Does centralizing surgical expertise accelerate skill development, or does it hollow out local medical ecosystems that communities depend on for more than just complex procedures? Global governance frameworks for telesurgery do not yet exist at the scale required. A surgeon licensed in the United States operating on a patient in rural Kenya crosses jurisdictional boundaries that current medical law was never designed to handle. Building the regulatory architecture to match the technology is now one of the most urgent challenges in global health policy. None of these challenges invalidate the technology, they define the work that must accompany it. Every transformative technology in history has arrived ahead of the frameworks designed to govern it. Telesurgery is no different. The question is whether we move fast enough to build those frameworks before the gaps cause harm. What is certain is this: the direction of travel is irreversible. Telesurgery will scale. The only variable is whether it scales equitably, safely, and with the governance structures in place to protect the patients it was built to serve. The surgeon is 5,000 miles away. The patient is on the table. The robot is ready. And somewhere between those 3 points, the future of medicine is being written in real time. Telesurgery is not coming. It is here. It is operating on real patients, producing real results, and building the infrastructure that will make world-class surgical care available to every human being on Earth, regardless of where they live. The barriers are real, the challenges are serious, but the direction is set, and the pace is accelerating faster than anyone predicted. The surgeon doesn't need to be in the room anymore, and that changes everything. The operating table just got a lot smaller. Hit like, share this with someone, and subscribe to SynthCosmos. We cover the science reshaping our world as we know it every single week. We'll see you in the next one.